According to data from Statista.com, oil and gas companies spent $76 million lobbying our government in 2020. According to Climate Change Realty, if just 3 out of every 1,000 homebuyers in America use Climate Change Realty to find their real estate agent, we could have donated more than $90 million to Citizens Climate Lobby so that they could lobby for nonpartisan climate policy. Welcome to the podcast. Salvador, great to meet you, man. Thanks so much for taking some time to come on the show. It really means the world to me.
Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to sharing with you what we're working on at Ocean-Based Climate Solutions.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. What you're working on is really cool. You're hitting the 5 pillars? There's like ocean upwelling and downwelling, direct air capture, mineralization, reforestation. I don't know. I'm just naming like the different ways to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. But what you're doing is really cool, and I don't know anyone else who's doing it. So I'm really excited to dive into this with you. But before that, I always love to get a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the current moment.
Sure. So my name is Salvador Garcia. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Ocean-Based Climate Solutions. After college, I joined the Peace Corps. This was back in 2008, and I was in the Small Business Development Program. I was assigned to the Northern and Southern Andes of Peru to work with small and medium-sized businesses. I ended up falling in love and staying in the country a lot longer, and had a successful career there in real estate. But in 2018, my daughter was born, Luana, and it just changed, my way of thinking. I decided I did not want to raise her in Peru. I was thinking about moving back to the States. So I started looking at what I would be doing in the States, using my career and my background. And it was around that same time that Greta Thunberg was drawing a lot of attention to climate. And I had always grown up learning about global warming. I knew it was a thing, but I didn't realize how dire of a situation we were putting ourselves in. So I somehow found myself in this niche of carbon removal. And I was really inspired by, what scientists were working on with direct air capture, even ways of reforestation. I found it very amazing. But I realized pretty quickly that there wasn't enough land, energy, or water, on land to be able to scale reforestation and direct air capture projects up to avoid the 1.5 or even 2 degrees C warming by the end of the century. So I started looking at the oceans, and I discovered kelp can double in mass every 12 to 13 days, which I thought was pretty cool. But then I discovered phytoplankton could double in mass every 24 hours. I need to know what projects or what people are working on this. So I learned about ocean iron fertilization, thought that was cool. But then I discovered this guy out in a landlocked state, Philip Kissel, working on a wave-powered pump that was designed to bring nutrients from the deep ocean to the surface and to feed phytoplankton so that these phytoplankton would grow. And I thought that was very interesting. I reached out to him in 2019, and it was before the pandemic. I tried raising money for him in Lima, where I was at, looking to see if I could bring investors on board. But Limeños or Peruvians are very conservative when it comes to sustainability investments. But we stayed in touch, and I did some work on for marketing for him. But the pandemic hit, and things kind of got stalled. It slowed down. But around early 2021, Elon Musk had announced the X Prize carbon removal, and I got back in touch with Phil. I was like, Phil, your project needs to be in this. Let's do this. And I got him to record this video. We didn't know what the X Prize was at the time. I didn't do any research. I just knew that Elon was going to be donating $100 million for carbon removal projects. So we spammed Elon Musk's account with this video about what we're working on. And I think Phil liked the effort. It wasn't the best video. It was actually pretty terrible, but he offered me a job a month later, and I've been on the team ever since. So now I find myself in Albuquerque after a year of raising funds, and getting in touch with large corporations, letting them know what we're working on, how we would like to work with them. I'm helping my team to build these ocean nutrient pumps, and I do have a presentation that I could give that will at least give the visual, your followers, an idea of how it works, and I could do my best to describe it for the audio only listeners.
Cool. So let's definitely do that. But before we do, did you say that you went to school for, was it business or what was it?
So I I graduated from high school in 2000, and I wanted to be a cardiologist, but I got scared of seeing the cadavers in the anatomy class, and I switched majors twice. I went to art, but I didn't really get a lot of family support, and then I switched to biology, but that's another story. It's a long story. I eventually found myself back in Northern California studying at what is now a Cal Poly Humboldt in Arcata, California, and I got a degree in business with an emphasis in marketing. And if you happen to hear any whining in the background, that's the Irish wolfhound singing. I don't know if you can hear it, but...
Well, we know that the dogs sing when there's a lot of potential for carbon drawdown. They get very excited about it,
I think that's what it is. He's listening in on our conversation.
And he's like, phytoplankton can grow in 24 hours to twice the size. Oh, but
yeah.
So I'm wondering why did you decide to join the Peace Corps after you graduated from college? Where does that desire come from?
Well, that came from Robert Chapman, my high school teacher in Eureka, California. He taught English writing seminar, he tried to anyways. Most of the class was him just talking about his experience in Nepal as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I was a poor kid, with just thinking about being a doctor, but also thinking about being about adventuring. I'd never traveled my entire life, really, and I thought the Peace Corps would be a good place to go after college, whatever I graduate in. So 6 months before my graduation date, I applied to the Peace Corps, and I was accepted pretty quickly. And I had my choice of different countries. I thought I was going to end up in Guatemala, but they ended up assigning me to Peru, and that's where I ended up at.
Yeah. Well, I just love that story of you like struggling to figure out what you want to do and then going on an adventure and then falling in love. And then you said that you got into real estate. So you found a way to kind of build a firm financial foundation. And once kind of that family came together, now you're like, let's figure out how to leave this place better than when I found it, because now I got a family to take care of, which brings us to today. So yeah, I mean, we can go ahead. Let's talk about the mission of your company, Ocean Based Climate Solutions, and what exactly y'all are doing. If you want to talk about that or pull up the presentation, I'll kind of leave that up to you.
Sure. I think maybe it would be great to present to you what we're working on.
Totally.
Here, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Jump over here. So yeah, what we're working on right now is helping corporations reach net zero. They are by and large the largest polluters, and we know that conventional mitigation techniques like solar energy saving light bulbs and wind energy is not going to be enough really to reduce the amount of CO2 we need in order to avoid 1.5 degrees C warming. So negative emissions technologies are absolutely need to be considered. And it turns out corporations, they want to be net zero, and they're seeking actively carbon dioxide removal solutions with a preference for engineered solutions. They want durable sequestration, so long-term. They're also looking for scalable solutions. They will also want low risk of reversal, and that just means they don't want their reforestation projects going up in flames. And they're not, of course, experts in climate, so anything that is presented to them must pass muster of their consulting climate scientists. And for your visual listeners, they'll be able to see that there's the little image I have here of different negative emissions technologies. In land-based, you see direct air capture, bioenergy capture and storage, afforestation, biochar, enhanced weathering. There's a whole lot of other options. And ours is also on the list, and it's known as artificial upwelling. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. But, why artificial upwelling? Well, and this is the right time actually to start thinking about ocean solutions. Land-based carbon dioxide removal is not enough. Reforestation projects are going up in flames. And more recently, the National
Yeah.
Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine cited our company and solution as a path forward in their December 2021 report for ocean-based carbon dioxide removal. And what we do is we build and deploy ocean nutrient pumps, also called artificial upwelling pumps. It's an ocean-based CDR, carbon dioxide removal. It's an engineered / nature-based solution. It operates entirely on wave power, and its sole function, Ethan, is to deliver nutrients from the deep ocean to phytoplankton. And it's from a depth of 500 meters, so half a kilometer. The durability, which I will talk about more ahead, could be between 100 to 1,000 plus years. And it's scalable. If you think about it, the Earth is 71% ocean. That's the surface. 65% of Earth's surface is ocean desert. It's void of life. It's a blue ocean. And this is a perfect area for our technology because at the surface, there's no nutrients. It's all in the deep ocean. I'll get to that in a moment. But there's no land, water, or electricity is required except for when they're being built while our pumps are operating. And there's no risk of reversal. So not a lot of people know this about the ocean, but the deeper you go, the higher the concentrations of nutrients. For your audio listeners, on my screen, I have diagrams of phosphate, nitrate, and silicate. And on the left, there it shows the depth, and on the right, it shows the increasing concentrations of nutrients. And the deeper in the ocean you go, the higher the concentrations of these vital nutrients that help grow phytoplankton. Now, to simplify it, the ocean is kind of like oil and water when you get out to the deep ocean in terms of mixing. The top layer is heated, it's less dense, versus the deep ocean, it's colder and more dense. So it doesn't really mix unless, of course, there's a passing whale that will swim up and down the water column and help mix these oceans, fish as well, or even storms that are out in these areas. But after 200 years of whaling, there's not a lot of whales. 90% have been killed off. We're overfishing our oceans, so there's just less life in this area to help naturally mix these waters. And what we do is we draw up from a depth of 500 meters nutrients, bring it to the surface, and as Earth has been doing for the past 2.6 billion years, immediately begins growing phytoplankton when we bring up these nutrients to the surface. Phytoplankton are responsible for 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe here on Earth. So how do these ocean nutrient pumps work? Well, first we must deploy them in nutrient depleted zones. So this is far offshore and away from coral reefs and to deliver those nutrients from the deep ocean to the surface. And the moment these nutrients hit the surface, they immediately begin growing phytoplankton. Phytoplankton can double in mass every 24 hours. They live for about 48 hours before they sink and die. Or prior to that, a lot of them are just eaten by zooplankton and fish that are also in the surface, and they are then pooped out. So when it's sinking, that is a form of carbon sequestration, particulate organic matter. It's a type of marine snow. Marine snow is actually dead phytoplankton in fish or bits of detritus sinking to the deep ocean. Ours is a type of that. And what we do is we use a sophisticated ocean instrument that's tethered to the bottom of our ocean nutrient pumps to measure the sinking rate and depth of the phytoplankton, so we could then determine how long it has been sequestered. So what you see on the screen now, and I'll do my best to describe it for your audio listeners, is what scientists know about the duration of the ocean carbon pump, or the biological carbon pump in the ocean. And that is when phytoplankton is detected sinking at more than 300 meters depth, you can estimate, or is currently estimated, at least 100 years of sequestration. If you could detect it going more than 1,000 years depth, then 1,000 meters, you then get potentially 1,000 years or more of the durability on the sequestration. And so in this sense, our technology is a game changer. That dead phytoplankton and fish, ultimately and over time sink to the sea floor. Actually, the majority of Earth's CO2 is held in limestone, deposited on the seafloor. And the White Cliffs of Dover are an example of that. It's millions of years and billions of coccolithophore shells just kind of peeking out at us from above the sea. So our business model at the moment is to sell pumps. Currently, with inflation prices and with a minimum of 20 pump deployments, we're selling the first 250 tons at $850 each, and then every ton after at $25. So this is for every pump, we sell the first 250 tons at $850 each. Now, why do we do that? Because we need to build and deploy these pumps. And then once they're out, deployed in the ocean, there's virtually no cost, or the only cost that we experience is the iridium cost, the remote satellite uplinking of the data. The pumps are fitted with all sorts of sensors, so we know the health of the pump. And then the Argo, it's one tethered for every 10 pumps, also uplinks data that helps us determine how much CO2 is sinking. And when you compare us to other negative emissions technologies, artificial upwelling is very compelling. First off, it's scalable. Like I said, we have 65% of Earth's surface where we could essentially scale, although we wouldn't need that much to help. It's affordable. Its permanence is 100 to 1,000 plus years. And the co-benefits are fish in the ocean ecosystem. Few people know this, Ethan, but a blue ocean is a dead ocean. There's nothing living in a blue ocean. When the water is green, it's got life and it's got phytoplankton. What we're essentially doing is greening the ocean deserts with our pumps. And one of the previous, maybe it was the previous slide, was kind of an exaggeration for your video viewers. What you're looking at is there's the Earth, and I have the North Pacific subtropical gyre, basically the North Pacific Ocean, on screen, and I have this green ring. This green ring is kind of an exaggerated view of, if we had millions of our pumps deployed in the ocean. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to empower Earth to heal itself using its own wave energy, and use a process that it has been using for many, many years. And if you compare what we do with reforestation or trees, there's just no contest. Phytoplankton are the Lamborghinis of nature-based solutions. On my screen, I'm showing a graph that shows how much CO2 is sequestered by an acre of 50-year-old trees over time versus phytoplankton. And phytoplankton is just the volume of CO2 absorption and sequestration is
it's more than 10x
superior.
More than 10x the trees. Yeah.
So our team is led by Philip Kissel, our CEO. He was inspired by Hurricane Katrina to build these pumps. His idea was to cool the upper ocean of the Gulf of Mexico to lower the intensity of hurricanes. But he discovered along the way that what he was also doing was artificial upwelling. And he couldn't find a market for the upwelling for just cooling the ocean, the surface of the ocean. But since 2005, he's been working really hard to develop this technology. And Phil Fulham is our chief engineer. They're both based in New Mexico. I know, a landlocked state. It's nowhere near the ocean. But the challenge really with ocean nutrient pumps and artificial upwelling is the engineering. And this year we are doing some pretty amazing tests. Again, for your video viewers, they'll be able to see what the pump looks like. If you guys are interested, you can visit our website at ocean-based
I'll
It's
link it.
TASED.
I'll link it in the
And
description.
but yeah, there. What we're looking at here is just the configuration of the pump, and on this other slide that I just switched to, you see the pump, the way it's designed, and the tube here is not to scale, but the tube would be 500 meters in depth, and the way it works is when the buoy falls on a wave, the bottom weight valves open, allowing that deep ocean water to rush in. When the buoy rises on the wave, it closes the valves at the bottom and the water rushes up the outlet that you see here at the top. So I've been in a metal shop in Albuquerque, New Mexico for about a month. I come from Lima to help them build the pump. I'm not a factory type person. Like, I've been lifting, I've been helping like cut these things. It's been a really enriching experience to work in the metal shop. And we have a textile shop in Santa Fe where we are stitching and rolling the tube. And we're going to be doing trials this year. So we're doing an engineering trial in April off of Port Hueneme, about 40 nautical miles west. There, it's just a 100-meter tube that we're going to be deploying. It's purely engineering. It's going to be completely fitted with the ocean instrumentation and the Argo. And this is all in preparation for tests that we're doing out in the Canary Islands this summer. We're going to be doing a 6-month trial, deploying the pumps in the eddies, the anticyclonic eddies that naturally form south of the Canary Islands. That's going to be led by Dr. Ulf Rivesel. He's one of the foremost experts in artificial upwelling in the world. And it's in conjunction with GeoMar, which is the German Oceanographic Research Institution in Kiel, Germany, with, I'm forgetting the name of it, but the Oceanographic Spanish Ocean Research Institution in Las Palmas, Gran Canaria. We're going to be on the Sarmiento de Gamboa. It's an ocean research vessel. There's going to be gliders, sediment traps, BGC Argos, plus the research vessel. We're going to get, we hope, lots of great data out of this. And yeah, that's basically what we're working on. And in terms of where we're at with, carbon credits or carbon crediting, we're currently working with Verra under their Seascape Carbon Initiative. It's in progress, so we expect to have the methodology approved within 12 to 15 months. So we're currently selling pre-certified credits via the pump. So each year we estimate currently that a pump can sequester about 250 tons of CO2 per year, although some scientists that we've spoken to internally have said it could be 30%. We may be underestimating by about 30%, and that's just based on the upwelling volume that our pumps are designed to do. So, and that's where the idea of being able to recover upfront costs in the first year of deployment. So yeah, that's the presentation essentially. Happy to take your questions or expand on what I've just shared.
And time. Salvador, you're bringing me back to senior year of college, like entrepreneurship pitch day class. I really appreciate seeing that though, because it's really, really cool. And instead of just diving into questions, what I'll do is kind of explain the way I understand what you just said, and then you can kind of correct me and see if I'm understanding it right, to make it very simple.
Sure.
You guys have a giant pump that takes nutrients from the bottom of the ocean that's lying dormant and brings it up to the surface. And when you do that, it feeds phytoplankton, which are then fed also by the sun, which makes them grow bigger, which draws down carbon, which makes the phytoplankton sink down to the bottom of the ocean again and sequesters that carbon. And what's really cool about what you're talking about is that it's completely powered by the seawater. You install the pump, and then you're done. You don't need to power it with oil. You don't need to power it with solar power. It moves with the ocean currents. And if I'm not mistaken, you said you're estimating that once you install a pump, it will last between 100 to 1,000 years in the ocean?
So a couple corrections. It's operated by wave power, not by it's in the sea or in the ocean, but it really depends on the wave power, the height. The durability of the carbon sequestered could be between 100 to 1,000 plus years. The pumps, we estimate that the current pumps that we're testing now could last up to 80 years. They're really over engineered. Just to give you an idea of the size of the buoy, it's about the size of a small pickup truck. The all in all, the pump with the bottom weight valve weighs about 7,500 pounds. I think that's close to 3 tons or near there. The bottom weight valve is what helps keep it vertical or keeps it vertical. Um, and yes, the function of the pump is to use the wave energy to open and close the valve that is 500 meters deep. And when the water reaches the surface, you're right, it immediately triggers ocean photosynthesis. You're right, it triggers the growth of phytoplankton. That in photosynthesis, we all learned in junior high school in the States, anyhow, was you need sunlight, you need water, you need nutrients, and you need CO2. And the byproduct is ultimately oxygen. And phytoplankton produce 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe on Earth. It's a pretty important aspect of, where of what we're doing. Another thing is, I mentioned that 71% of Earth is ocean surface. 65% of where we're deploying is is ocean desert, which is perfect for our location. We don't live on a green or brown planet. We live on a blue planet. And it led me to believe pretty early on when I was choosing where I would want to help that, if we're to win the war on climate or lose it, it's going to be in our oceans, right? It's such a big part of Earth. It is Earth. So that's why I'm happy to be here and happy to be advancing this technology. This year we have tests, and I'll be, out in Los Angeles. I'll be out in the Canary Islands. I'll be in Los Angeles like late April. So if anybody listening wants to meet up, they can message me, and I'll be in the Canary Islands in late July. So, yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you doing it, man. I love the enthusiasm, and I love how you just dove into this project because you see the potential to. Of course, there's a nice capitalistic benefit. There could be a potential huge market for this, but also it's really not only going to help draw down carbon, but can really bring more life back into the ocean. So could you explain a bit why the ocean desert is the perfect place to deploy these? Is that because it's going to ocean forest those areas potentially, or is that not right?
So the technology here is designed to bring nutrients, and there's a study that we have on our website by Dave Carl and Ricardo Letelier, done in I think 2008. And what they discovered off the coast of Hawaii was, when they upwelled artificially water from depths of below 300 meters, they were able to create multiple blooms of phytoplankton. So that was that. And they found also the deeper you go, the higher the concentration of nutrients, just like your video viewers will be able to see in the presentation that I gave. But economically, we found that it made more sense to go as deep as 500 meters because it just gets much more expensive to build and deploy these pumps. But based on the upwelling volume and the concentration of nutrients of phosphate, nitrate, silicate, and other nutrients in the water, those ratios, we would expect an overall sequestration of about 250 tons of CO2 per year from one pump. So, and it's modular. If we have, one pump, that's sequestering 250 tons of CO2. If you have two, it's 500. If we deploy 16, it's equal to about the amount of carbon that the orca plant in Iceland is capturing and storing. 4,000 of these would be a megaton. 4 million of these would be a gigaton, or a megaton is 1 million tons of CO2. A gigaton is 1 billion tons of CO2. It's really hard to kind of visualize that, but I believe by 2050, the goal is to be able to pull between 20 to 30 gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere. And there's a lot of companies right now working on it, and it's going to really take a collective effort with all these approaches. I just happened, when I was in high school, I was a national science bowl competitor, and I was in the biology, geology, chemistry questions in that competition. If you're not familiar, it's a science competition sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy. Anyhow, our high school, I was on the team that won, and we got to compete in the nationals where we met some really smart kids that kicked our butt. But it was that science background of mine helped me decide to want to go towards the ocean. And I researched this for about a month before deciding to start looking at ocean solutions, and just found this particular project super inspiring, and I'm here to see it through.
And you're going to do it, man. Like you said, and we need everyone. But this is a very, very promising, I don't want to say event, or not even a technology, whatever you want to call it, a movement forward. And you said that your business model is to sell pumps, but then you also put up a price per ton. Can you kind of explain exactly how that would work and who would want to buy these pumps?
Yes, so our business model is to focus currently on corporations. Although I've been exploring potential retail versions of this, but corporations are the companies that every year they release sustainability reports, and they report on their scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. These emissions ultimately are, the sum total of them are their carbon footprint. And what they're looking to do is invest in projects to get to net zero, because they're by and large the largest polluters, your Nikes, your Microsoft, even your Goldman Sachs. Their efforts, their being in business is, causing pollution in the atmosphere. So they should be the ones that ultimately foot the bill for getting down to net zero. So the idea here is each pump has a cost for deployment. Each pump comes currently to a little over $100,000, and each biogeochemical Argo fitted with a ocean thermal energy conversion battery, which just charges it while it goes up and down, comes to about $150,000. I mean, the instrument used for measuring the amount of CO2 removed is valued more than my house in Lima. It's just expensive. So the building and deployment costs must be recovered. So any engineered solution must be recovered, and we just divided it by about $850, and that would be enough to recover the initial deployment and building costs in the first year. And then there's an ongoing monitoring fee. We must be monitoring these 24/7, 365, the health of the pump, and in reporting on the carbon sequestration. So, and that's what ultimately the companies want. The benefit of the pumps being deployed in the ocean is ultimately the fee, and that is more phytoplankton just means more life. Hopefully, much more fish. We'll be getting some more qualitative data once the pumps are deployed in the Canary Islands to see how it interacts with local aquatic life, marine life. But by and large, we believe that it's going to be very beneficial for the oceans.
I have no doubt. So the corporations would be buying this as a way to offset their carbon footprints. So it's going to specifically be sold on the voluntary carbon market. Is that right?
So on the voluntary carbon, yes, in a way, yes. What we're focusing on right now is the science and engineering, but there are corporations, I won't name which ones, but
Sure.
Big ones, people who are already making purchases in carbon removal that are interested in buying from us. It's just a matter of, will the pump operate for a long period of time? They want a little more scientific data, and that's why we're really thankful for the folks that are going to be studying our pump this summer. So pretty excited about that. The idea here is, one person described it as, so I could buy a pump and it'll create my carbon credit, right? 250 per year every year for perhaps up to 80 years with routine maintenance. That sounds like a good deal. And I'll be helping the ocean ecosystem. Those are the thoughts that okay, I'm interested, but I want to see more scientific data. So a lot of carbon removal projects, not just ours, are currently in this stage where, they're testing, they want to prove that, the overall life cycle analysis of the pumps is actually removing net CO2 that you're not just claiming. So what's great about this is that the data that we will provide will be made available to the public. We're going to be transparent with the data that we're providing. The Argo data, for example, that is immediately public. Those are sent to the servers in France and in Seattle, quality controlled, and then made available publicly. So yeah, that's. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. That makes sense. But these corporations also need to decarbonize their activity, and then there's outlying industries like aviation or shipping that makes it really, really difficult to do that. But someone like a J.P. Morgan or or Goldman Sachs, they should really be decarbonizing. But this is a great holdover. Don't you think? I don't want to put my opinion into it. Do you think that it's enough for these companies to just purchase enough to get them to net zero? Don't you think that that we need to draw down more carbon because we're not decarbonizing fast enough? Do you think any of them would be interested in going further than net zero? Like,
There are some companies. Microsoft, I believe, has a goal by 2030 to remove all of its CO2 since Bill Gates was working actually out here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, working on Microsoft. They want to go all the way back. Yes, that's kind of the idea with carbon removal technologies. I do think, though, we're going to need the help of, solar, wind, and energy saving light bulbs. Those are all going to be part of the collective effort of trying to get to net zero by 2050, which is the big number that a lot of people are using now. Some corporations are pushing it to 2060 or 2070 because it's a really daunting task. I think what most carbon removal technologies, how they can help, like ours, is to help zero out those difficult Scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emissions are the emissions that are kind of the residual, or it's emissions that is done outside of the company. So an example of that is McDonald's. They've used packaging or what have you, and they've given that packaging out to somebody else. That person drove to McDonald's, perhaps if they went through the drive-through and then left. And in order for McDonald's to do business, it caused another emissions, so to speak. So those difficult Scope 3 emissions is where carbon removal technologies like ours can really help corporations get closer to their goal. And what we want to eventually grow into is a carbon sequestration as a service and make it easy for companies to be able to order pumps. I don't know if we would do it directly from our website, but eventually we'll get to that level, and we would be able to provide them an approximate deployment date for when the data would be live. A lot of the corporations, what they're doing right now is purchasing carbon credits, that are readily available, and claiming that as their towards their yearly goals. But right now we're really working on how we could tweak it for ourselves so that they're incentivized to want to purchase our pumps that will make their carbon credits for them. So yes, a company, if they have, for example, 18,000 tons of CO2 that are, I don't know, for a cost of goods sold or something like that, it creates 18,000 tons of CO2. Well, the pumps that they would need to buy would be about 8,000 divided by 250. I don't have the number. I'll let you guys do the math, but that's the amount of pumps that they would need to buy. And we would build and deploy them, and those pumps would last many years with maintenance. And each year after that, after the first 250 tons, the cost would be much less. And those are the costs that we're currently getting with inflation prices. Hopefully it doesn't get any worse. Hopefully it gets better. And that's currently like bleeding edge technology prices as well. We do believe at scale the prices will come down, but it's not about racing to the bottom. It's about being able to provide quality carbon removal that is actually doing good for the world.
Definitely. I think the price of a carbon credit will come down, but I wouldn't put my bet on inflation not going up, man. I mean, it always does. And we also printed 40% of the US dollars in the last couple of years. So that's a conversation for a financial podcast.
Yeah.
But it's a factor when you're in business. And not even if you live in the world, it's a factor with the reserve currency being consistently inflated like crazy. But one of the big concerns people have about rising levels of CO2 in the atmosphere beyond climate change is the cause of the coral bleaching, which is killing all sorts of marine species across the world, and that is the increased levels of acidity in the ocean. I was wondering if you knew how increased amounts of phytoplankton might affect this. Is this going to make acidity worse because we're talking about pulling more carbon into the ocean? What's the relationship like there?
So yeah, and you could Google this. Since 1950, about 40% of Earth's phytoplankton has disappeared. So there's a lot less phytoplankton, and yet the ocean acidity is still going up. I can't remember the name of the Australian person. He's somebody who advocates, for example, kelp sinking. And he mentioned that if we were to drop 200 parts per million. Now, to give you a perspective, right now Earth is at about 420 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
1 part per million is equivalent to 7.8 billion tons of CO2.
Yep.
He said that if we were to drop 200 parts per million of CO2 down to 3,000 meters depth, that the concentration of CO2 in the deep ocean would increase only about 2%, because the oceans are vast. I don't think a lot of people take into account how vast they are. Now, one thing to consider in our case is that we deploy far offshore and away from coral reefs. Our pumps are free drifting. They're not moored, and they're made for the deep ocean. Coral reefs are a little closer to the sun, or a lot closer to the sunlit zone. So we don't think that there's going to be a huge negative effect from having thousands or millions of pumps. But that's something that the scientific community will debate, and we just need more data on our pumps, and that's what we're working on getting this year.
Are there any other ecological issues associated with rapidly increasing the growth of phytoplankton?
Some folks, bring up harmful algal blooms as a potential issue, but harmful algal blooms are more prevalent near coast. We're out in the open ocean. It's very different environment out here. We can't say for sure whether or not the kind of phytoplankton that we would grow would be harmful algal blooms. Something that's interesting is that if you know the difference between reforestation and afforestation is the planting of, it's a monoculture. It's the same pine tree for acres and acres and acres. Reforestation is, a combination of different plants and trees in that area. We're akin to ocean reforestation, where what we're doing is naturally mixing the ocean. We're not, what we're doing, a whale would potentially do by swimming up and down the water column, helping to mix and kick back up the nutrients while they're submerging and breaching the ocean surface. There's a really cool video called How Whales Change Climate on YouTube. I think your viewers and listeners would love this. It kind of lets you know how important whales are for the ecosystem, and it kind of gives you an idea of what we're essentially doing. And we're accelerating what scientists call the biological carbon pump, and that is the mixing of the deep ocean with the surface to trigger phytoplankton growth. Um, we've had, by the way, we've had Dr. Ulf Riebesel and Dr. Andreas Oschlies, both of GeoMark, the German Oceanographic Research Institution out in Kiel, Germany, comment on what we do. And Ulf Riebesel thinks that the surface of the ocean in terms of ocean acidity will not change, but it's hard to gauge currently with current knowledge whether it would increase vastly in the mid and deep ocean using artificial upwelling. And our pumps are like straws, teeny tiny needles in the middle of the ocean. They're quite small when you compare it to the vastness of the oceans. And Dr. Andreas Oschlies thinks that by and large, and based on where we're going to be deploying the pumps, that it will get a largely positive view because we're growing phytoplankton. This happens naturally, like almost immediately, about maybe 16 seconds or 30 seconds after the nutrients are introduced into the sunlit zone, you start to see a tint of green in the ocean. And that is ocean photosynthesis. It really is quite beautiful.
Yeah, and bringing life back into a dead zone is something that's truly beautiful as well. Are you aware of any other organizations or governments that are working on like this upwelling tech at all?
I am not. I have seen some copycats like pretending and using pictures from our website,
Of course.
claiming that they're doing this, but no. We are the bleeding edge people working on the engineering. Really, artificial upwelling. There's a lot of research on it. It works. The real challenge is, can it be long lasting? Can it be sustaining? The oceans are, the harshest environment on Earth. We're talking 20-meter waves in a hurricane storm. But the pump has a force limiting component built into it, meaning that if a 20-meter wave should come, or any wave greater than 3 meters, it's impossible for the pump to rise any higher. It'll duck under the waves, and that also makes it so that it could work, so that it could be long lasting. That was something that was considered a lot over the years in terms of its engineering. That it worked both physically and biologically in the ocean.
And you just happened to meet this guy who's designed this pump from his brain. He came together. It was just one person who designed the pump. What's his name again?
So Phil Kissel had the idea, went out and built like a 300-foot pump just to see if he could make this idea work. And it was with Bill Fulham. So it's the Phils. Both of them are named Phil. They're both the people who worked on this and tested it. It's they've done 300 feet tests. Now we're working on a 400-meter test this summer out in the Canary Islands. But yeah, they knew that if they could bring cold water from the bottom of the ocean to the surface, they would be able to lower the intensity of hurricanes. They didn't know what they were doing was also bringing up nutrients. And that's where this, odyssey really started in, could this be used to potentially sequester CO2? And the answer is we believe so. We're going to have confirmation this summer. This is what a lot of corporations, a lot of scientists want to know. And I'm just excited to be here and to be able to help move this technology forward. And yeah, I mean, the way that I got involved, like I shared at the beginning, was I wanted to help. I reached out. I wasn't expecting anything in return. I just wanted to know how I could help. And then I gave help. It was just a video that I spammed to Elon Musk over and over and over and over again. And I don't think he ever watched it. If he did, he ignored it. But because it was just such poor production. But anyhow, Phil just thought that the effort was worth bringing me on, and I don't think I've disappointed him. We got funding for tests, so we're pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it too, man. Tell Phil Squared I said thanks, because
All right.
we need y'all. We need everyone, all hands on deck. And before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have any ideas about how other startups or tech in the drawdown space can find ways to collaborate together rather than become competitors for these limited carbon credits.
Well, I know that artificial upwelling enhances kelp growth, and there are a lot of sargassum and kelp projects out there. Right now, we're currently focused on deep ocean artificial upwelling, but I do want to stay in touch with a lot of kelp and sargassum projects out there that are looking to grow and enhance the growth of that kelp. Because artificial upwelling enhances the growth, it actually speeds it up by, I think, 25 to 30%. And yeah, I'd be happy to be in touch with them. And in terms of right now, we need, I mean, this is just the first large pump that we're deploying. Will it be a success? I absolutely hope so. But we'll need to iterate. We're going to learn over time. We're going to make it we're going to make it stronger, and we're going to find materials and source materials that'll be less expensive. The idea here is to make it a real scalable approach to be able to, contribute to cooling not only the surface of the ocean but the planet overall. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be part of this project and really happy to be able to share it with you and your audience.
So let's say that everything goes well this summer with the tests and you get strong validation that this product is going to work exactly as you think it is. 250 what was it? Pounds?
Tons
Tons.
of CO2
Tons of CO2.
per year.
Where do you see this company in 5 years time?
Oh, so we already have a few corporations that are just waiting. We have a few investors that also just want to purchase pumps and create their own carbon credits.
Sweet.
We the thing is, we want to be absolutely sure that everything is working as designed. We want the validation from the scientists. Where we're testing currently is the Atlantic Ocean. It doesn't have the best biogeochemistry, so the best location really is off of California for deployment, so that it just starts circulating in the North Pacific subtropical gyre. I see this as getting a lot of attention. I do know that we were recently invited to be on a carbon removal documentary that's in the works. That'll be due out late 2023. So you could look out for that. There'll be certainly videos of what we're working on in California and in the Canary Islands that'll be available then. But I do think that, once we have the methodology down and the engineering down, I think a lot of people are going to want to collaborate and help us speed up the iteration, and look for ways of making it less, I want to say less expensive on the overall monitoring. I would hope that iridium costs would come down, but that probably won't happen. There's very few players that have the satellite uplinking. But the idea here is really to scale. I mean, if you think about it, I think humanity builds about 100 million cars a year. If we could industrialize this, we could quite quickly get to the to the overall CO2 atmospheric concentrations that we desire. We want to be back to. I think with the collective effort, we could make it back before 2100. To like 290, 280 parts per million. It would be great to get down to that level. And then what's great is that we could, the pumps are recoverable. They could be removed. And yeah, you could scale it back if we need to. But like I said, I don't think we'll reach that point. I think there's going to be a lot of collective efforts, because there's a lot of really cool carbon removal projects out there, like carbon mineralization is one that I like as well. And other ocean CDR projects, particularly kelp, I think is really inspiring. So anything that has to do with the oceans, I absolutely love. And I'm still inspired by land-based solutions. I just believe in ours, and I hope your listeners will reach out.
Yeah. Well, After today, I believe in you, man. This is awesome, and there's so much potential, like what you just described. Thank you so much for sharing your potential vision of the future. I really appreciated that last bit. Any final pieces of advice for young folks who are passionate about helping to build a better world, exactly like what you're doing?
Um, my advice would be to. I know that this isn't. I want to say. I think the best advice and the best thing that I've ever done was travel. I know this has nothing to do with sustainability. In fact, that you're going to end up using an airplane potentially. But just getting new experiences out there, experiencing yourself and other cultures, I think is really important. It just widens your mind a bit, and that's been very helpful for my own life. So I know that's not sustainability, but in terms of sustainability, you know, if any young person is out there, that wants to help out, I do have a young high school student actually, who was begging to be on the boat. He wanted to go. He's from Florida. We're in New Mexico, and he was writing me emails saying he wanted to be on the boat where we're deploying the pumps. And we can't do that for insurance reasons. But I've created a position for him to study artificial upwelling. He wants to be a future marine biologist. So yeah, he's only 15. He's going to some high school in Florida. I'm hoping I help him. So like, if you want to help out, just reach out. We can use all the help we can get. We're not at a stage right now where we're generating large amounts of revenue, but that's what I did essentially. Is I reached out to Phil and I said, how can I help? My background's in marketing and sales. I did really good in real estate in Peru. How do you need my kind of help? And at the time, he's like, yeah, I could use your help in this and that. And I said, well, I'm going to do what I can to help you. And didn't expect anything in return. I just wanted to further the mission. So if you're inspired either by our project or some other carbon removal project, find a way that you could help. Maybe they don't want your help. I reached out originally to Carbon Engineering, and they just wrote back, said like, no, thank you. We're fine, and that was that. I never heard back from them. And that was, I had, that was about a week after I had started researching carbon removal solutions. But yeah, I hope that helps.
It does help, and that high school kid is going to grow up and make some big moves. I can tell already. But Salvador, I appreciate the time, man. Love what you're doing. Looking forward to watching the progress and seeing how it goes. Thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been really great.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, and we'll see you. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrboulder.com today.